Welcome to this edition of the Techies webinar series. My name is Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. We are technology and business reporters at the Times of India, and both of us have been with TOI a long time. Shilpa for 10 years, I've been there 25 years. The two of us will moderate this discussion. Our discussion today is on India's semiconductor and electronics industry, the trends, challenges, careers, and it's in association with the India Electronics and Semiconductor Association, IESA. India is very good in semiconductor design, but we are still heavily dependent on imports of electronics products. Most companies in the semiconductor and hardware manufacturing side say how difficult it is to do business in India. But things are changing. The government came out recently with the production-linked incentive scheme, and similar policies have been announced. To discuss the progress, to discuss what more needs to be done and the careers in this industry, we have with us some great entrepreneurs in the space. Most of them are also winners of this year's IESA has an annual Technovation Awards, and most of them are winners of some award this year. We have with us Dr. Satya Gupta. Satya is chairman of IESA and CEO of Seedeyas Innovations. Satya had a long career in Intel, then he co-founded multiple successful startups. Seedeyas is the latest startup, and Seedeyas is focused on building intelligent electronics products and solutions in the area of medical electronics, agriculture, and environment. Welcome, Satya.
Thank you, sir.
We have with us Parag Naik. Parag is co-founder and CEO of Saankhya Labs. Saankhya is one of India's first private fabless semiconductor companies. Parag also is a serial entrepreneur. Prior to Saankhya, he co-founded Smart Yantra Technologies in 2000 and Vyavya Labs, an electronic design automation company, in 2006. Smart Yantra was acquired by Genesis Microchip in 2004. Early on in his career, Parag worked on the mission computer, hardware and software for India's indigenous LCA Tejas program at Philips Innovation Campus, building the world's early digital TV and STB receivers. He has over 40 international patents. Welcome, Parag.
Thank you, Sri.
We have with us Dr. Srikanth Sola. Srikanth is a US-trained cardiologist who saw firsthand the effect of air pollution on his patients' health. In 2008, he began researching ways to reduce air pollution over large areas. After a decade of R&D, he formed Devic Earth, a green tech startup in Bangalore. Devic Earth provides air pollution control equipment that is changing the way industries, businesses, and cities clean the air we breathe. We hope to hear more about Dr. Sola's technology during the discussion. Consumers Research Council of America has called him one of America's top cardiologists. Welcome, Dr. Sola.
Thank you. Thank you, Sujit.
We have with us Vinay Kumar. Vinay is CEO and head of R&D at PathShodh Healthcare. Vinay's biosensing technologies, the biosensing technologies that Vinay invented are at the heart of PathShodh Healthcare. Vinay is an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, with a PhD in nanoscience and engineering. He has been driven by his desire to ease the burden of people suffering from chronic diseases and serve society. Welcome, Vinay.
Thank you.
And we have with us GS Madhusudan. Madhusudan is CEO and co-founder of InCore Semiconductors. InCore is one of India's first processor IP companies. Madhusudan is also one of the coordinators of the IIT Madras Shakti project, a project to build an indigenous chip. He's a collaborator with the Robert Bosch Center for Data Sciences and AI. He's an advisor to various government departments and was a member of the GOI AI task force. Welcome, Madhusudan.
Thank you.
Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the comment box on Facebook. Shilpa and I will put them to the panelists. Let me start with you. Give us a sense of where the industry is now. I mean, the IESA and all of us have been writing as well about the industry. The manufacturing side particularly has been a problem, even though we are good on the design side. Hardware has been a problem. There are plenty of challenges. Give us a sense of where the industry stands today, especially for smaller companies, indigenous companies like all of you, who are trying to create global brands, or would like to create global brands, but are facing challenges. Satya?
Sure, Sujit. Welcome everybody to this series of the Times Techie webinar. Now, electronics electronics industry as a whole, where semiconductor is part of it, right, is in a very strong focus, especially in last 12 to 18 months. But from India point of view, last 5 to 7 years, and significant progress has been made, as Sujit said, on the manufacturing side, right? From pure assembly of the products, we have gone one notch above, and there is basically the government schemes are making a big difference, like PLI for manufacturing. Now, from a overall ecosystem point of view, I think I've not seen a better time for this industry to start taking the next steps. There is a high sense of urgency in all the different parts of the ecosystem, government, industry, academia, to create more indigenous Indian products. While basically for more commodity or established products, we do the manufacturing. But for the future of the manufacturing and self-reliance, we'll have to come through the products, right? So there has been a lot of effort from all the players of the ecosystem to start focusing more and more on the both electronics and the fabless products, which are ultimately going to drive the manufacturing and other aspects, right? If you take the effort of the government from the DST programs like Nidhi Prayas or mighty program like Tide and Electropreneur Park, they are significantly focused program on developing the entrepreneurship in the electronics product area. And then we have basically incubators like Safal, which was supported by Government of Karnataka, which is primarily focused on the fabless product companies, which are again need of the hour, right? Now, going forward, means like we are even looking at a very large government policy coming, which is solely going to be focused on the fabless product companies, because that is one area which requires basically a lot of support, a lot of funding, and a lot of infrastructure, right? So government of India is basically on the verge of coming out of a policy on the fabless product companies dedicated to them, right? Electronics products, I think we have almost 300 to 400 meaningful startups which are working on the basically electronics products across various sectors, be it medical electronics, agriculture, environment, like Dr. Sola, and other areas like Industry 4.0, automation, building automation. Even basically there are startups now which are basically building the products for space, like Indian version of Elon Musk to basically launch a rocket, right? So I think that whole thing, but now what we have to do is that this is the foundation we have laid in 5 years, last 5 years, right? Now we have to basically make this foundation towards building a Taj Mahal, right? So foundation is done. Now job for all of us, entrepreneurs, government, industry body, academia, to utilize this foundation to build a basically beautiful building on it, where we can basically help the startups to scale up. You talked about basically scale up of the startup. We don't want toy projects out of the startups, right? We want basically these startups to have meaningful projects and basically grow themselves. So I cannot basically use the terms like unicorn and all of those things, but certainly we want to have at least 50 companies in next 5 years, which will basically grow beyond $100 million. Okay. I think I don't like to be the unicorn company with unicorn losses also. We need to have basically unicorn companies with unicorn profits, right? So I think that takes time. So that's where we want to head to, at least 50 companies which are basically 100 million plus.
What's the timeline you're looking at? Yeah.
5 years for electronics, 7 years for fabless.
Yeah. Okay. Parag?
Take a little bit more time, as Parag will basically vouch. It basically takes time to basically build the IP, build the team, build the products, get the market. It takes a little bit more time than electronics product. Although deep electronics product like Dr. Sola has been working for basically probably about a decade, right? So depend on the depth of the technology. But typically on average, we expect about 5 years for electronics companies to start basically becoming good revenue company, and about 7 years for basically fabulous product companies where they start seeing some traction. They will not become 100 million in 7 years, but they will start seeing the product traction.
Parag, you're also feeling optimistic now?
Yeah, I'm always optimistic, Sujit. I think I'm one of the first ones, right? I've been battling for 13 years, 13 long years in trying to prove, that we can do semiconductors. A lot of us actually sometimes we think, on the Excel sheet nothing makes sense. I think we just had this discussion earlier, but we are playing for pride more than anything else. I'll just give you a background on what are the characteristics of at least what we do. We do hard things. Semiconductor is hard. We also do telecom infrastructure now, which is even harder, right? So marrying these two and what are the characteristics of these businesses, right? I think Satya pointed out right away. It's a long gestation period, right? It's an extremely long gestation period, 10 to 12 years. You need investors who are really patient. In fact, the other really difficult part about this is operationalizing this business, right? It's not it's easy to build technology in India. Since over the last 2-3 years or 4-5 years, you're getting to see an ecosystem. An ecosystem is much more than just a group of engineers. We have got almost all top-notch talent in this country, but we lack the leadership to actually take that and build a product. Building a product needs marketing, semiconductor marketing, which is very different. Product marketing, we need lawyers. In fact, a lot of times you could make some mistake in a contract, and your company can come down, especially in international contracts. Then you need to have sales folks. All these constitute the ecosystem. And right now we only had one part of the ecosystem, and most important part of the ecosystem that's still missing is the finance, is risk capital, right? And also local markets. There are very few products that you can actually, as a fabless semiconductor company sell to, right? You don't have the Samsungs or the Apples or the lower tier ODMs who can actually take our product. So in our case, we had to go up the level chain and build end-to-end products. And one of our products is on Indian Railways. That's the one that we received an award for. So we had to build an end-to-end product there. What happens is, the other characteristics of this is it's what Peter Thiel calls the 0 to 1 business, right? It's not one to end business. A 0 to 1 business is essentially extremely difficult. It's mostly on execution part. It's not business model innovations, right? It is fundamental deep tech innovations. And fundamentally, some of us are trying to also change the behavior. For example, in our case, we have been talking about software-defined radios for 13 years, and people were laughing at us, right? And now suddenly,
software-defined what?
It's called
software-defined radio.
Software-defined radio, right? There is this whole move in the last couple of years in the telecom side to build what's called virtualized RANs, which are nothing but software-defined radios in a different version. So it takes a long time to build these businesses. The one-to-one businesses, the Flipkarts and I don't know what, the Oreos and the Swiggies, they are business model innovations, right? Once you have the unit economics, you just replicate them, and that's how very easily you can create a unicorn out of that. So we in our own journey, we are probably not still 1. We are almost close to 0.9, and we've been there from 0.9 to 0.9 to 0.93, right? And that brings me to the fundamental problem of our businesses also, is that there's a power law. As you grow, go to 70% of the product in a certain amount of time. Within 70 to 90, you take exponentially more time. And to take that product into production, and especially carrier grade products that we are building. One of our products is on the on the locomotives, which is a very harsh environment, has to work 24/7. That's even more difficult, right? That's the challenge. So the entire thing is not just about the idea, but the ecosystem, and also the ability to take this to, and that's what takes time to take it to That's the big challenge. But I think, like Satya said, we have built the expertise over the last 8-10 years. There's a reasonable size of there's a critical mass of companies, people who now understand how to go through this, right? What is lacking is finance, and that's something
Capital
that probably
and
we should look at. Today, most of us actually get money from the US as investors. So we still can't go to any Indian investor and raise money. And once that problem gets solved, I'm sure in the next 5 to 10 years, the decade is going to be ours. Just like the Chinese, it was a Chinese decade last year. The
last
Chinese decade,
decade.
the last decade. This is going to be our
This
decade if we play
decade.
our cards right. And one last point, just to give you a sense of proportion, I read a Wall Street Journal sometime back, which talked about how Huawei was funded. Huawei has been banned by a lot of countries around the world, right? They were given $60 billion of credit, tax breaks, of businesses and all of that. So if you get $60 billion in over 20 years, which is approximately about $3 billion a year, why not? Why not unicorns? I mean, we can create, I don't know what you call a $10 billion company, a decacorn or whatever. That could be possible.
Great. I mean, so finance is the big issue, and local markets is what. Madhusudan, you agree? I mean, what has been your experience?
Well, I've been running design services companies before, so I've been in this game in Asia, and we had subsidiaries operating out of India since about 1998. The fundamental problem always has been a lack of local market, right? You leave everything aside. We had design capabilities and so on, but it's only in the past 2-3 years that we have complete product design capabilities where we can do like a complete SOC, correct? So even though we had design engineers for a long time, a complete product level design capabilities just started coming. And it's fortuitous that the local market for electronics, everything from controllers in your washing machine, those are all high items, right? All fans are going inverter based fans now, right? So a typical fan manufacturer that I know of does about 5 to 7 lakh fans a month. So he himself will consume about 1 million pieces of semiconductor a month, right? So the local market is finally there, and we have the capability to design products to that market. There's still an absolute lack of venture funding in the semiconductor space because there's no dedicated VC operating in that area. There's a lack
So you
of.
think the government has to step in? That's the only way. I mean, do VCs come up?
I get very nervous. I mean, I'm part of the government establishment. Partly, I advise them. Government can act as an enabler. If you take a look at all the major countries, right, even US to a degree, definitely Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the semiconductor industry was essentially shepherded by the government. The government can do things like enabling. For example, for InCore, I'm not too worried about funding. I want orders, correct? So if the government says that, look, all low energy fans and low energy ACs and refrigerators should use local chips, you do kind of a mandate and stuff, as long as you're within WTO norms, which is a bit of a problem in this area. I think it's the government's job to help get the and build the VC ecosystem. I get very nervous if you ask the government to step in too much, right? It can help, but then it cuts both ways. But the VCs need to step in a bit. But I can understand why they're reluctant, right? Because there's no great business plan in place. And you're competing with the e-commerce companies and stuff, which you got like this hockey puck growth curve, which a semiconductor company really can't deliver. The problem is just not here. It's only off late because all the AML and some of the new RISC-V stuff that semiconductor investing is picking up in the valley. Earlier, even in the valley, it was a bit of a pain getting semiconductors for that. The other problem is that there is like an absolute lack of product management capabilities in the country. It's very tough to hire a VP of product marketing. So I'm trying to work with ISB, with IM, along with Safal and stuff, to see how we can get product marketing capabilities seeded within Indian companies. Because designing a product is one thing, but designing a product to a price target, to a market, understanding the market, how do you compete, all of those strategies, branding, we have that in other industries. It's not there so much in the semicon or the software industry. So that is another big lacuna that needs to get filled.
Okay.
We're getting there. I think 2021 would be a good year for local semicon startups, fabulous or otherwise, to actually start making their mark. And with the government PLI incentives coming, I think the journey is slowly beginning.
Okay. Okay. Vinay, Srikanth, step in. I mean, Vinay, what is the experience?
Chiming in to bring these folks, right? Basically, the demand and the chips is going to come when people like Vinay and Srikanth will start consuming them, right? So I think we need to grow these kind of the companies to create a market for the basically chips Madhu and Parag are going to produce.
Okay. So Vinay and Srikanth are building these
I think
electronic products which will.
Please
So,
comment because
Exactly.
you are
thank
the
you.
demand creators, right? So,
Yeah.
Thank you, Sujit and Dr. Satya for inviting in this, fruitful discussion. See, I'm too young to comment on the whole journey of the semiconductor industry, but I can tell you one thing, and I'm very optimistic about the whole ecosystem. Why? Not more than a decade ago, when I was in the college, the one question which was coming into the every entrance technical exam was, what is the full form of VLSI and LSI? Right. So nowadays, when I look back, then there is the huge difference. These are the common things, which youngsters are talking day-to-day life, right? So one thing, of course, we have a elephant in the room, which Dr. Satya also rightly pointed out, the electronics manufacturing, the foundries, which are, I think we are talking about this from last several decades, that when will India have the foundries and all. But I think now we crossed that time limit, right? And we should look beyond the other solutions, right? I'm giving you one example. In the semiconductor industry, we always talk about, at one time we were following the Moore's law, and now more than Moore, the 3D heterogeneous integration within the technology. We are all talking about that. But let me give you the one example which we followed at PathShodh. We did a decade of the research effort at IESA to develop some technology in the medical domain. And when we started, to develop this technology, we were very sure that we want to develop something which we can translate into the product, and it should reach to the population, right? So that people should use this product. And I remember that there was the huge brainstorming. My professor in SENS, Professor Navakanta Bhatt, and myself, we did the lot of brainstorming that which technology shall we adopt, for the medical device. It can be, semiconductor based, MEMS based, or whatever. Now, when we and because I'm coming from the medtech domain, so I will give you the specific example of the medical technology. Of course, the semiconductor and electronics technology is the major driving force for any smart gadget, we talk about, right? And we already reached to the very advanced stage of the semiconductor, domain. But I think now this is the time that we should look the heterogeneous integration of the other technology with the semiconductor technology. I'm giving you one example. Today, if I'm developing a product for the healthcare, and I want to test a parameter in the blood, for example, in a simple way, I want to measure the hemoglobin level of a patient. Then directly, silicon technology cannot interact with the human blood. Of course, silicon technology can process the data very efficiently. The fraction of the nanosecond speed is fantastic. But when we talk about a product, then product is like an interdisciplinary domain, right? For example, a medical, a product where the input itself is a human sample, right? So on the one side, we have a box of electronics hardware, which can very efficiently process the data, and we can use the AI. The doctor is sitting in the office from the remote area. We can send all the information there. On the other side, the body, silicon chip cannot talk. So this is the time we should also look the integration of the other domain with the semiconductor and very advanced electronics technology. There is no doubt that without the advancement of the electronics, we cannot develop any meaningful and workable solution or product.
Vinay, shifting gear to your product, right? Obviously, it's so. What kind of you made an electronic product for basically medical?
I will,
right?
I will just tell you.
Nice.
This is the product, right? So this we called lab in a palm.
Okay.
Why? Because this single device, which I can hold in my hand, can measure 8 different parameters.
Okay.
And not like the simple parameters. These are the parameters like early detection of kidney failures, the protein deficiency markers, the markers related to diabetes. I'm not talking about the blood glucose, the very advanced markers like HbA1c, glycated albumin, early detection of kidney failure. And if I compare this technology, in the laboratory of the pathology lab, we need at least 5 big machines to test these 8 parameters, which cost around 1.5 to 2 CR. Right. Now, what
this
I'm
is connected to the body. How does this work? Is it connected? What is it connected to?
Blood drop.
So this is like very simple. You can just press this, the new test button here, and we have the very important part of this product, which we call the disposable test strips.
Okay.
Right. And here is the innovation. We talk about on the one side the hardware. We developed the flexible electronics. Right. So this is the flexible electronics where the biotechnology we integrated with our IP. We have the 21 patents on this technology. So on this flexible electronics, we have our IP chemistry. As I mentioned that silicon cannot talk to the blood. Silicon cannot talk to the urine sample of the human. But we need some mediator to integrate this human samples with the advanced semiconductor technology, right? So the human will interact, the sample will interact with the chemistry, which is a mediator, which is a bridge between the semiconductor electronics and the human body. And after that, our advanced technology process that with a very high speed and can provide the, the solution within a minute, right? So this type of, the integration of the different technology, I think is.
Can you share some challenges in deployment of the technology, how the market reception of the product is? Sometimes basically we develop very good products, but the market acceptance is very difficult to achieve. We face it in the semiconductor area, electronics area, all those areas, right? How is basically the market response and your basically business side of your company?
This is a very, very, very good and very
Satya, we can't see your full face, sir. Satya, camera little.
Yeah. First of all, I'm giving the example of PathShodh here. That why did we started that? And this was the time, first in 2008 or so. And everybody, even today, for example, the diabetes is a big health concern for our country. After China, we are at second number. And the tragedy was that we are not manufacturing our own glucometer just for the blood glucometer, which is, follow the international accuracy standards from the WHO or IESA, right? And being a juvenile diabetes, this was my vision that, we should do something, for example, for diabetes, which is a cost-effective and accurate solution. So in terms of the market, we were very aware that there is no such product available anywhere in the world. And we initially talked to the different doctors, clinicians, that if I give you, there is a test in the diabetes, which is called HbA1c. And if you go to the lab, the test cost may vary from say around 500 rupees to 1000 rupees in between. And that is the gold standard for diabetes management today, as per any medical guideline, right? So we got that why from our own experience from the clinical, like that if you can develop this, we are waiting clinical community from last 2 decades, such device. But the problem was in the new medical technology. I'm giving you the one example that every year Apple came with the new model of Mac and iPhone. But the machine in the pathology lab, which is testing our kidney, for example, the basic technology remains same from last 5 to 6 decades. There is no change. We are only changing the electronics. The hardcore of the technology is same. So if we develop a novel technology, then definitely the entry point are, it's very challenges because of the clinical validation. You have to validate the new technology. And I'm telling you what we follow at the PathShodh. Before launching this device in later 2017, we validated on around 35,000 real clinical samples, right? So that type of the confidence, you have to achieve before launch the medical technology, to the market. So if you really have the novel idea and which is really the unique thing, which can give, for example, in the medical domain, the very high accuracy, the same accuracy you can achieve which you are getting into any pathology lab which is FDA approved device. If you can offer to the patient a cost effective solution, and if the patient can pick inside their pocket, that is anywhere anytime, right? Even in the small, forget about the rural India, the small cities, such machines, such analyzers are not available into small pathology labs, right?
So let me ask you $1 million question now. How many units you have sold so far?
So initially, before the
17 you launched, right? So it has been about 3 years for you.
Yes, I'm giving the answer of that. In September 2017, we sold this around 120 machines, where more than thousands of the. I'm giving you the example near to the Karnataka Saragur. First time the pathology lab was reaching to the tribal women screening. Those people were just disconnected from the modern pathology, and that was possible because on that area it was very convenient to go with such a technology.
So who's buying it? Who's buying it, Vinay?
So we have the the different customer segments, includes the private clinicians,
Okay.
and foundations and trust, who are working into the rural area. But vary from the home diagnostics users till the doctors and clinicians can buy that.
Okay.
But I'm giving you very important point, which is the regulations and certifications of the medical device in our country, right? That was the area before 2017. There was no set rule of the regulatory affairs of medical device. First time, central government came with medical device regulation 2017, where all the point of care handheld medical device is mandatory, to get the certification from CDSCO. And I'm happy, it took the time for us, and that was like 8 to 1 year around time. We got the ISO 13485 during that time, CDSCO license for the manufacturing. For our blood glucose test, National Biological Laboratory, which are the authority of the accuracy standard, they had given the certificates of accuracy that this is following WHO and ISO guidelines. So one thing is that you don't have the time, sometime when we have the product, we want to enter into the market. But I think you have to do the due diligence, the due process. It may take some time, but then it will funnel the lot of competition in the market.
One question.
Shall we bring in Srikanth now?
I think
spoken yet.
I think it will be very useful for all of us if you can tell us how many cumulative units you have sold since you launched the unit.
Yeah. So I'm telling that in 2017, 2018, we had the tie-up, here in Health Ministry, for example, Government of India bought that. There's the Tata Trust who deployed this. There are the other foundations, around 120. But in end of the 2018, we started the process to get the regulatory certificates, because that was a mandatory process, In that 2019, we got all the regulatory certificates, the manufacturing from CDSCO, all the, when we approached the CDSCO, the guidelines was that ethics committee, do the validation, that is a huge task. We talk nowadays every day the vaccine validation. Medical device validation is also a very different area where you need the ethics committee clearances, which are approved from the DCGI, right?
Yeah,
So we
Satya, I've been on
completed.
that side also. It's quite cumbersome, no? It's quite
Yes.
cumbersome and lengthy. Yes, I've been
So
there.
Srikanth,
we
why don't you,
completed.
Vinay, can we have Srikanth now? Srikanth hasn't spoken yet. We'll
Yeah,
run
please.
out of time otherwise. Srikanth, what? Are you happy coming back to India?
Very happy. I came back to India. I was doing very well in the United States. That's where I grew up. And I came back because I wanted to serve our country. And I was 10 years at Satya Sai Hospital. And right away, I saw the need for what our company, Devic Earth, does now is to mitigate, to reduce the burden of pollution on public health. And how this started is an interesting story, if you don't mind me sharing. I was, in the US, when Indians come to the US and they're just fresh, we call them FOBs, fresh off the boat. And so I was the reverse, having come from the US to India. I was fresh off the boat. And in my first week working at this awesome hospital that provides completely state-of-the-art care for free, I had a young fellow who was just 28 years of age, a shoe cobbler on the street with a massive heart attack. And he came to us and we did his angioplasty operation. We opened up the blockage that caused the heart attack. And a few days later, he walked home. He walked out of the hospital to go home. And I was feeling so proud of myself. Remember, this was just my first week. A few days later, another gentleman, aged 32 years of age, came in. Same thing. He was a taxi driver, had a heart attack. The only reason we could pin it down to was air pollution, driving his vehicle with windows rolled down, exposed to vehicle fumes all day long. He also had an angioplasty operation, but despite everything that I could do or our team could do, we couldn't save him. He died right on the table in front of me, and I had to go and explain to the family that, I was very sorry. This got me thinking that there is a huge need for technology that will mitigate air pollution. And, when you look at people like Madhusudan and Parag, they're so good in what they do. What I had to do was take the knowledge that I had from biomedical engineering and then adapt that along with my team to build technology that would mitigate air pollution over large areas. We looked at air purifiers, we looked at ionizations and electrostatic precipitators, and all of them work well, but for very small areas. And that's when we hit upon the idea of pulsed radio waves, which is exactly how MRI scanners work. They're using radio waves in a pulse scanner to generate certain images of the body. As a cardiologist, I do cardiac MRI all the time. And so what happens in pulsed radio wave technology, if you do it just right in a very specific way, these pollution particles have positive and negative charges on them. And several technologies like ionization and electrostatic precipitators take advantage of this to charge these particles and cause them to collect together and settle out. But the problem, and it works really great, but the problem is it just affects small areas, like what comes out of a flue stack in a factory.
So they settle down, they
get collected somewhere. Yes. What I was interested in was, what about that shoe cobbler or that taxi driver or the other 7 million people that die of air pollution every year? And so what our team figured out is, when we pulse these radio waves, we set up a weak electromagnetic field that then, through the dipole effect, causes these charged particle pollutants to coalesce much faster. And the velocity which they deposit, called the deposition velocity, actually accelerates. That's what we hypothesized. And that's how this technology works. But because we're using pulsar radio waves, now it's Wi-Fi waves only, we're able to affect large areas. And so when I look at the technology that Madhusudan and Satya and others, Parag, of course, have been used, we're using that every day. That's what drives our systems. That's what we communicate with through our IoT. Wherever our machines are in the field, whether it's a factory or industry or plant or office, to tell them how to function, how quickly to function. And initially we started with off-the-shelf systems, and now we're moving to embedded systems that are custom designed for our applications, and we're shrinking the technology to get smaller and smaller.
So what's been your experience? I mean, with the ecosystem in general?
Yeah,
market.
we owe a lot to the seniors here because they have really paved the way. The startup ecosystem is much more robust now. People like Dr. Vinay have been incubated in IESA. I mean, what better place to be in India? We had tremendous support, whether I was at, Satya Sai Hospital where I was working before, a charitable hospital where I didn't have financial pressures, on me as a cardiologist to generate a lot of funds. And I had time to do research work that was beneficial for humanity. We had, there's a huge startup ecosystem that has really educated startup founders, helped us to get funding, helped us to negotiate things like not just marketing, sales, and business development, even things like IP, trademarks, and all the other legal things that any good startup company has to take care of.
Satya, you were trying to do something similar, no? Well, how much has Satya? You're muted.
So I think since last year we are trying to find the different solutions which are practical in the nature, and they are towards basically solving the problem, not basically analyzing the problem, not basically changing the laws and things like that. So what we had decided that we will scout basically across the country the ideas which are towards the solution of the pollution problem. We assume that there will be sources of pollution. Whatever you do, government does this, that, there will be different sources at different points of the time. But for whatever reason the pollution is created, can we develop the technologies by picking up the best brains, which will remove the pollution irrespective of whatever is the source is, right? So that's where basically we started talking to a couple of companies. They are basically technology, what he is doing through Wi-Fi, the other technology, which are basically filtration techniques. Basically, people have tried towers and this thing. We have been trying with another startup like basically Devic, who is basically putting the filtration devices on top of the vehicles. Okay, so a lot of these things basically need, just like what Vinay was saying, that basically medical devices need certification. I'm finding the pollution devices are much more difficult because how do you prove it, right? In a lab environment, they say, oh, you proved it in the lab. That's not sufficient. Show me how it works in the outside. Now, how do you, it's very difficult to prove those kind of things. So I think we are in that process of convincing the government that you have to try, okay? That there is nothing basically given 100% here. We cannot keep on doing this analysis paralysis that basically I develop a product, then okay, I go to the CPCB and they say, okay, get it to, go to IIT Kanpur, get it certified, go to IIT Guwahati, certified, right? We have done enough of that for last 10 years. Let's try some of these things which industry people are saying with a high confidence that this will work, okay? If it may not do, basically, if we claim 50% removal of the pollution, it might do 30%, but we are pretty sure it will do 30% at least, right?
Okay, okay.
Believe us also, right? That basically the people like Dr. Sola has basically put up basically 10 years into it, right? I have put basically 3-4 years into it. We have the practical experiment. Yeah, we don't have a basically 10,000 line equation to prove basically this works or something like that, but it works in the practical field. So that's why we are all trying. So we are all part of the same group. I generally very regularly in touch with Dr. Sola about these things because this is something which is solvable and we are not doing anything about it.
Okay. Okay, so there are questions coming in. One popular question is always around skills. So I already got a question from Shapura Begum. What skills and qualities are expected of a fresh college graduate to make a career in the semiconductor industry? Parag? Madhusudan already mentioned. Madhu already mentioned about product management and marketing.
No, actually, see.
This is for technical job, right?
Yeah, I'm also part academic, right? To some degree, all of this industry-oriented teaching and all that is a load of nonsense. The basic problem we have with most engineers is we don't actually graduate good engineers, right? Your solid basics. If you're a semiconductor person, your basic analog background, your digital background, your design background, all of that has to be solid. If you're a computer science person, algorithms, data structures, compilers, operating systems, the basics get ignored, right? And for some reason, we seem to think of engineers as technicians and saying that the latest buzzword in technology is what the engineer should be trained in. What the semiconductor field needs, and the semiconductor field is true blue. I mean, it's hardcore engineering, right? It's not like running an app or something. You get a chip wrong, it's $20–30 million down the drain, right? You can't afford to have. So engineering discipline along with basics is what is needed. The curriculum in pretty much every institution is good, but people need hands-on stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah,
nothing magical about what it takes to be a good semiconductor engineer. Get your basics right and focus on labs and stuff, and you will get recruited.
Yeah, I think to sum it, as long as you know reasonable math and physics, the rest of the stuff can be taught if you have the right attitude as well, right? You need a lot of patience. This is a long, especially when you're doing RF part. RF a lot of times is a bit more like, at best magical. It's more an art than science at times. So there has to be, like Madhu said, a lot of hands-on stuff. In fact, in India, we have this challenge, right? Getting our hands dirty and getting things done aren't as important as clearing some examinations. So that's one of the problems that we have had. So if you look at, I think I personally always have been a big advocate of the vocational training. In fact, I find a lot of vocational guys much better as long as you have hunger to learn something.
Really?
Not worried about, in Bangalore, there are tons of people who get, it's very easy to compare, right? Everybody else is comparing with the other guy. Google is paying so much, Intel pays that much. So once you get into that trap, God forbid you, it's a rat race.
Okay.
The German model of the middle stand, where you have a lot of apprentice, you work as an apprentice for some time, for 3-4 years, learn the tricks of the trade, and then become.
Where will you work, Parag?
Sorry?
Where can you work? Where can you work?
Lots of companies offer internships.
Lots of companies
internships like that?
Yeah, lots of companies. People don't want to work, Sujit. A lot of people don't want to work. They just want to, they are more worried about how's the tea, coffee served, what kind of cubicle I sit in, and all of that. Most of the guys have that problem, right? You remember you first came to our office when we were in Kalyan Nagar about 8-10 years ago. We had to move from that office because people judge you by what offices you work in, not what work you do, right? That's something that we need to get over, and that the middle class obsession with stability, right, which is in the mind, that I need to work for an Infosys or a MNC brand. That is a problem. So if you get that out, there's enough to learn. And I think after 30 years also, I don't think I don't claim to know enough. There's always more things to learn. It's just that you have to have a curious mind.
Madhu basically, I think, said something which is really bothering, that the fundamental knowledge basically is people are not focusing. They think that, okay, they can run a synopsis tool or this kind of a thing, basically, then they are done. But if you ask them that what is the basic principle of flip-flop working, right, they won't be able to tell you, right? So I think the foundation is we are not building. Second thing is that if I compare to our basically 30-40 years, whenever we studied, right, we had very little resources, right? Today, these people have so many resources. Every knowledge is at their fingertip, right? I don't think whenever I go and interact with basically students in especially tier 2, tier 3 colleges, right, they are not leveraging those resources. You can basically run anything, basically get any information within 5 minutes of whatever you want, right? But that drive to basically go out there, search for the information, consume that, I think that is basically something which is missing. I think people have to use the resources which are available. There are so many online courses.
Satya, the simplest way to do this is to treat all BE degrees as preparatory. And unless you do a master, you shouldn't be given an engineering degree. we have kind of made a BE degree meaningless. I don't think 90% of people with a BE degree are not engineers. No, the fundamental characteristic of an engineer is curiosity. Everything else, I don't need really high IQ people. I need people who are curious. You need the same curiosity out of as a 2-year-old. I gave a talk at a IEEE seminar college. They had me again after that, obviously, because to the left of me was the trustee, the right of me was the principal. I started by saying, look, it's the job of these two gentlemen to make sure that you don't get an education, and I'll teach you how to get an engineering education in spite of their best efforts, right? You should have watched both of them squirm. They were closing the lab at 4 o'clock in the evening because the buses had to go on some nonsense like that. And if your classes get over at 3:30, and a kid wants to play around with an oscilloscope or something, and then you shut the lab at 4 and send them home, how on earth are you going to turn an engineer out? Not going to happen. And RF is tough. RF is very, very tough. DSP, which is fundamental to software-defined radios, has become an elective in most colleges. And the standard mantra in any, right, is that if you take DSP, you'll fail the course.
Yeah, our selection process for the job is also very weak. I had to, sorry to say that, because when you graduate from a basically place like Berkeley or something, right, and you have an interview in Google, they make you sit for 3 hours and write basically the code based on a very advanced data structure. We never do that in our selection process. No one does that. Infosys and Wipro, they have to hire in volume, right? So they say everybody above 60%, chalo aa jao, right? That kind of a thing, right? We don't grill them, right? I think even internship interviews in the US are very technical, very tough. They grill you on whatever you are. Suppose you are.
If you do it very tough,
you on the data structure.
You will not get anybody.
You won't get anybody. So we have the opposite problem. So what you do is you take them in and teach them. That's what we do, right? At the end of the day,
it has to be done both ways, right?
We become the training school for
trainers. That's right.
That's right, Parag. But basically, if they expect that this kind of the grilling will be done, right? Then they prepare themselves. Some of that we can teach on this side of the fence. Some of them they have to learn on the other side of the fence, right? There has to be a fear that they will not pass an exam. If they do something, then they will learn, right? So it has to be both.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. Educational institutions also have to change. Shilpa, more questions?
This question is from Lohit. When can India build its own chips without foreign dependency?
You want me to take that?
Building it today.
Yeah, Parag, you can.
Parag is there who's building it.
Yeah,
Parag is building.
We've been doing it for a decade now, and we have now also working with top-notch US operators, right? Rolling out 5G networks, satellite solutions, and all of that. But yeah, I think this Atmanirbharta, right? You have to be a bit cautious about. You can't be an island, right? It's this whole semiconductor supply chain or the electronic supply chain is global.
It's a global supply chain.
We should not attempt to say I will do everything in India. We should say, okay, I want to be 30% of this or 40% of that. That's the way that we need to do that, right? And
what should India do, you think?
So we should set a target for a certain percentage of the global supply chain, right? So today we are literally zero, almost zero, close to must be 0.001%. I don't know, this humongous uncountable infinity of some 50 billion or 100 billion or something like that, right? That's the overall electronics market. Out of that, we are not even 500 million, right? From a product perspective. So we should set actionable targets saying, yeah, next 5 years, we'll probably hit 5% or 10%. I think there was a extremely overtly ambitious target set by the government, I think in 2017, by saying that we'll be net zero in 2020. Right, and at that time we were laughing because we were only one of the two companies. We thought we would be $400 billion company because we were only one of the companies out there. So you set up reasonable targets saying, you know, I'll be 10 billion in 4 years, 20 billion in so much. Look at how, I mean, just take a look at China, right? From not on the electronic side. Take a look at how they won Olympic medals. Since the 70s to now, they are the number 2 or number 3. How did they do about it? It's the same set, right? They went about with a plan. They didn't go to 125 medals in day one. These things take time. These things take time. These things take bipartisan approaches to building this ecosystem, right? That's a 10-year process. And if we spend 5 years in it, like Satya's target of more power to him, 5 or 50, 100 million, we'll surely get $1 billion company. And not in valuation, but in revenues, right? You would get that.
Yeah, I think the government, the way it looks, right? Basically, they look at the manufacturing as the key driver, right? Because They have to look at the employment and basically lack of import and all of those things, right? But the way from industry side we look at is that long-term basically value will be created when we design and own the products, whether it's a fabulous product or basically medical products or air quality products or IP products, right? Once you start owning the products, right? That's the job of technologists and the industry. We have to get out of the service mindset and start creating products, because manufacturing is also ultimately a service which we are doing it for somebody else. It's not creating an inherent value by itself. Inherent value is created by the people who create the products, right? So that's the job of the industry, to basically work with the government. Government has to work on their priority because they have to basically jobs, this, that, all of those things. We have to push the needle in basically creating more product companies in India, which in long term will drive the manufacturing also. So like if you like take a smartphone today, basically Samsung or Oppo or Vivo, these guys are driving the manufacturing of the smartphone, right?
And that's Satya, that's exactly what people like Vinay and we are doing, right? We're driving and we're saying, we need this, we need this, we need this. Can you give us this? And I'm saying, can you give me something that works at plus 70 degrees, or how about minus 30 degrees? And we're actually driving the product specifications because of our requirements.
Absolutely.
What about funding for?
I want to ask one question to Dr. Satya or Madhusudan. Anyone can answer this. This is not really my question, but a lot of when I interact with the engineers from the semiconductor domain, then they ask this question. Because I'm not in touch with directly with that after my this medtech journey. In the curriculum of our engineering and particularly the semiconductor. Here in India, mostly, I'm telling most of the jobs we are offering related to design and verifications related. And at the, in fact, somebody asked me this, that at the classroom, we are, at the fundamental, when we talk about the fundamental, of course, fundamentals are very, very, very much required. But whole fabrication steps of the whole CMOS technology and whole process engineering and everything, we are learning. So is there any need that we make the different curriculum, related to the process engineering and much focus on the design languages or, TCAD tools and all that?
No, see, the curriculum basically is okay. Process engineering and stuff in Silicon needs to be taught, but where will you get the people to teach it, right? We don't have a manufacturing industry. So there are certain areas where you will not be able to get the faculty. I will settle for people knowing the basics here. See, if you look at what InCore does, right? We are a very odd company in one respect, because we are not trying to do an end user product. We are trying to create processor IP. So this is a foundational block if India needs to have a semiconductor industry, correct? So in one sense, it's glamorous. The other sense, it is actually a very long lead kind of stuff, because design wins take a long time. People don't.
Because sometimes these youngsters feel disconnected from that. When they enter into the job, there is no process.
No, understood. Vinay, I think if you look at a typical curriculum of the VLSI, the manufacturing steps and CMOS and all those things is very small part of it, right? The major part of it basically one is the fundamentals of semiconductor, like how does a transistor work, how does a junction works, and so on and so forth. So those fundamentals are important, but I don't think we are doing a good job there. Okay. Yeah. Semiconductor manufacturing is probably basically 25% of one course. It's not really very heavy. So that much basic knowledge that basically you have to go, you have the metal layer, you have the poly layer, and this and that they need to have that basic thing. But I don't think it is very big focus of any of the curriculum. The curriculum is focused on basically basic technology. Then analog design is very big part of the curriculum. Digital design is very big part of the curriculum. Wherever there is a VLSI specific curriculum, right? But if you have a single course out of so many courses as a part of electronics engineering, then probably the different things get different weightage and so on and so forth. But any VLSI specific course, I don't think the focus is too much on manufacturing.
Okay. And anyway, a lot of the manufacturing issues comes out of material science. Okay, it's not necessarily semiconductor, right? And this country is very weak in material science. We don't have a focus on material science. If you look at a lot of the DRDO projects which have floundered, right? Single crystalline blades for aircraft engines and stuff. whole bunch of things. You'll find that we have not invested in research in material science. We don't teach material science properly. Even in IIT, if you don't get like 10 courses, metallurgy, material science will be one of your last choices, whereas it is one of the most fascinating subjects out there, right? We have very skewed priorities because fundamentally, I don't think science education is a very high priority. Otherwise,
you need to learn Python only, right? Why bother about
it's a passport to an investment banking job in the US. That's the problem.
You need Python only. So, Sujit.
Okay. Yeah, I have this question. I mean, of course, Parag and Madhu and all have answered, but let me put this to Srikanth and Vinay. Unlike software startups, electronic startups require some initial investment to build prototypes and working models. How can we overcome this shortcoming?
Yeah.
Srikanth,
Yes.
Vinay, how did you manage it?
We were supported by Ministry of Environment and Forest. So we developed our electronics and a lot of our work through research grants, through R&D, through NGOs. And I think, Vinay, you can probably echo the same for
that was good enough
PathShodh.
for you. That was good
enough to get us off the ground to develop a minimum viable product that we could show that worked. And then once we had that, then we could start to get some angel investments to actually develop the product, make a commercializable product. And then once that, then it's just almost a hockey stick growth from there. But for the electronic industry, there's, if you have a good product that addresses a important question, and you have good people who are doing that work, funding is available. It's easily available, but you just have to fill in those check boxes.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to get to a commercializable product?
It took us only 5 years, but it took me 10 years to actually step out because I was a cardiologist, right? I was already treating heart attacks and heart failure and all this stuff in the meantime. So then that last 5 years was spent improving the product, testing it, making sure it was safe, having experience in, as Vinay has seen in clinical research, I understood what needs to be done to make it, to prove that it is indeed a viable product. So that was the last 5 years. And then when I saw that it was literally reducing the number of people that came to the hospital with pollution-related illnesses, that was the last step that said, okay, now it's time to commercialize this.
Vinay?
So our journey also started on the government grants, right? And we started with the support of DBT, BIRAC, DST, the different grants incubated in ISC initially. And the good thing was, like when we incubated, we had a prototype of our product, which was in a pretty decent condition, workable condition. And we started after incubation, the clinical validation. That was a marathon for us, right? For that, the different collaboration with the pathology labs and hospitals, and because we had a list of tests which we were targeting. So some was the blood-based test, some were the urine-based test. Then it took around more than 2 years to complete the these clinical validations. And when we graduated from the IISc campus, now we moved out and we have our own manufacturing facility very near to the campus. Then, of course, there was the need of funding, and we had the angel investment in place. So yeah, I mean, that was the.
Okay, Satya, you need to go, is it?
Yeah, just one comment on this thing. I think the government grant system is pretty extensive for this kind of basically electronics companies. Yeah, for semiconductor companies, you need a different type of the funding, but for electronics company, I think the initial grant, I think India has put foundation. Easily, basically 20 to 50 lakh type of the grants can be basically sought if your idea is good, right? Through incubators, through schemes like DST schemes, what Vinay was talking, BIRAC scheme. BIRAC big gives basically 50 lakhs basically for prototypes. So I think that system is working. Now we have to basically make meaningful products out of those grants, right?
Okay.
So I'll thank you everybody. I have to join a meeting at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, okay. If everybody else is okay, we'll carry on for a few more minutes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Satya. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
From my side, I mean, Parag, where's the difference coming from? Srikanth is saying, Srikanth and Vinay are saying, so that's the difference. Electronics products versus semiconductor, the funding. You said funding is a challenge. So
yeah, so semiconductors are more foundational stuff, right? The time to build out a product, to prove it into the market takes much longer. For some of the systems products that these guys are doing, of course, 20 lakh and 50 lakh or a crore is good to start off with. I keep saying that for all these government schemes, we'll swipe it off our credit cards and give it to them. I mean, 20, 50 lakhs is the cost of one engineer in Bangalore for a semiconductor. I mean, to do a reasonable chip, take it to production. Even in India, I think you need between $10 to $15 million at least, right? You can't go anything below that. The cost of the tools, the cost of building, and you're competing. Just think of it. I mean, you're competing with competing with Intel and all the rest of the guys, right? So you have to have something very unique and different from the rest of the guys. We got funded 5, 6, 7 years ago earlier when nobody else was getting funding, because we had and that most of our funding came from US-based investors. Intel was one of our funders at some point in time. General Motors was an investor in us at some point in time. So it's mostly strategic investors who understand what we do come in. Financial investors so far is a no-no for us, right? And for them rather than for us. Our own journey, we started raising angel funding even before it was fashionable. So we have this something called, I call it the NH4 angels. We have got every small town from Bangalore all the way almost up to Pune, that everybody is put money in semiconductor. They didn't know what they're doing, right? They put money on saying that these guys are not going to, they're going to put money to good use and it's not going to go waste. That's how we started. We got our first round of monies. And then we did a couple of series with Intel and others, but still it's a challenge, right? So to take a product out to scale in a global environment still needs 25 to 50 million, really $50 million to take it there, right? You can't just do it on 20 and 50 lakhs.
Okay. Shilpa, questions?
We have this question from Keshav Murthy. This is to Dr. Srikanth Sola. Coming from a completely different background, how did you take a leap into starting an electronic startup? How did you find co-founders with electronics know-how?
That's a great question. Having worked at places like the Cleveland Clinic and others, premier institutions, I studied at Stanford. So Silicon Valley was, where I grew up in. Sand Hill Road, where all the VCs sit, are where many of my classmates sit. So I grew up with this kind of thing. And biomedical engineering was very much a part of what I had done in the US. We had helped to build some of the first new type of heart valves that are now used in literally hundreds of thousands of patients across the world today. So it was part of what we did. We were always creating. We were always looking at new ways of doing things better for our patients. And this sort of comes from that. I think the short answer, the one-word answer, is a team, right? It's not something you can do alone. You have to have a team, and you need A-level teams. You need A-level players on that team if you're going to win.
Thank you.
This question from Regin John. He's part of Silesium Circuits Private Limited. He's asking, we are a young startup in microelectronics, primarily focusing on analog RF. How can we contribute to the Fab consortium and its related ecosystem? Who can help?
Fab is a distant dream in India, I think, right now. And let's tackle. I think I like to look at.
He's calling it a FAB consortium. What is there something called an FAB consortium?
Fab. It means a semiconductor fab. FAB is a fab. A foundry in semiconductor lingo, right? So
no, I think what he's referring to, the new PLI is being announced early next year. So there are some proposals on the table. I'm hoping it kind of works out this time. I think they're looking anywhere from 65 to 28. But my short answer is it's a little premature. Focus on your product. Start building relationships with existing fabs, right? If they're doing analog, it's pretty easy to work with a fab at 180 nanometer, 130 nanometer. That's more than sufficient. And as soon as the Indian fabs come, transferring whatever you've done with the foreign fab to India would be a no-brainer.
Right. And to just to add to that, right, we should focus on the in the electronics food chain. The fab is to me at the lowest, right? We need to focus. It's easier to start off with where Srikanth and Vinay are doing and bring in those application innovations, then bring in the horizontal skills that you need for you need for semiconductors, and then eventually the fab. Once you have enough capacities, there are 4, 5, 10 companies which are actually generating a lot of demand. Then we could start populating the fab. Today, I think, to me, it's still a distant dream.
Yeah. And how easy is it, Madhu, to work with a global fab? I mean, is it to approach them? And
it can be painful for them to take you seriously. You can actually work through Safal or IIT Madras and other players and get those PDKs. Fortunately for RF, they don't need cutting edge. 180 nanometer, even 300 nanometer sometimes is okay for very low end RF and stuff. But 180, 130 is more than sufficient for a lot of the RF stuff. 65 max, right? So should not be a problem. I just started talking to them and we try to help them out, because RF is a very rare talent in India. There are not too many companies. Everybody talks about the glamorous digital electronics, which is the easier thing, but RF is where you kind of interface with the world. And there are very few companies in the RF area. And as long as they focus on their core competency, I think they'll have a smooth enough.
Yeah.
I second that. We've been looking for RF engineers for a long time, and it's hard to get really strong senior RF engineers or even middle engineers. So we've been mid-level engineers. So we've been looking for quite a while.
Talk to them. They have a good RF team. I think one of the founders of the company.
Silesium, is it?
Yeah.
Silesium.
I mean, I think the other founder has a doctorate in RF, used to.
Okay, you know them well. Okay.
I just met them like about Meiti gave me an intro to them, and they have pretty good skills and stuff. So.
Okay. Shilpa, are there questions?
This question, one question from Ritesh. How can the Indian semiconductor ecosystem benefit from the data localization policies?
Is there a connection?
Very tough, because essentially when you do data localization, you're going to host servers in India. For that, you need server grade processors. We are the only people who are attempting that, but that's like 2025, man.
Yeah, I don't think there are two orthogonal things, but maybe you could build, once you have access to data sets, which you anyway have, localized or globalized, whatever, you could build specialized AI architectures in real time. That's
not very specialized. I mean, general purpose servers, all the RISC-V activity that we're doing, other people are mostly in the embedded space. To come to the PC class or go to the server class, IIT Madras has got an effort for a server grade processor. The first beta will come middle of next year. I'm hoping by 2023, 2025, we will have a Xeon class server core out of India. Then we can start using those cores in the local data center processors. Intel's transition, the transition away from x86 into ARM is happening very, very rapidly. You saw the Apple announcement. Now you saw Microsoft doing its own servers. Amazon has been building its own server chips. So all the big cloud vendors now design their own CPUs and are cutting AMD and Intel out of the market. I don't know to what logical extent they will take it, but it actually opens up an market for India where we can start building our own processors.
Okay.
Very frankly, I mean, InCore's goal and other people's goal is we want to be 100% self-sufficient in processors. We don't want foreign processors, period.
Okay.
Yeah, we have built DSPs, right? We have our own.
Yeah, it's not a big deal that can be done.
Okay.
We built processors out for quite some time now. Yeah.
Okay, we'll wrap this up. Last question, I mean, from each of you. I mean, if you have to tell the government 2 things that they must do to make this ecosystem stronger.
Just one, create demand. I mean, there's enough government.
Create demand. Madhu, exactly what would you expect?
So, for example, one of the things I've suggested, I actually wrote a note last week is, see, the problem is Indian companies don't have marketing and product skills, right? They've got good engineering skills. So I said, look, you take 5 of the standard products that are out there, motor controllers and fans, ACs, washing machines, point of sale terminals, IP cameras, right? Modems, 4G, 5G modems, which in the dongle and stuff. Forget the phones and stuff, right? Security devices. We outlined 6 devices and said that, look, you kind of spec out a standard for these, and you mandate local requirements. So automatically you create a demand for 20 to 40 million chips.
Okay.
India consumes anywhere between, we did an estimate, somewhere between 200 to 400 million chips is what we're consuming per year across various segments. At the lowest level of the embedded, when we actually checked with customers and the distributors, that itself is 70, 80 million. That's confirmed number, right? Equal number we are importing through PCBs. This is all low-end stuff, fan, remote control and stuff. That itself is nearly 20 million chips a year, close to, if we extrapolate. If we include the other stuff, 300. Out of the 300 million chips that we are importing, if you can create a local demand, that's more than sufficient. You don't need funding, right? The companies will find funding, they'll get good loans and all of that. Demand is key. Everything else will follow.
Okay. Parag?
Yeah, the one thing that I would like them to do is get rid of the L1 stuff, right? The L1 tendering process for technology. You can't buy the chairs and technology in the same way. The other thing is basically to create an ecosystem, look no further than nature. I mean, you can't create an Intel. You don't get up one morning and say, I want to create Intel, right? You have you create a environment in which you hope that you create an Intel or you create something out of India, right? I mean, I give this analogy in nature. We all see this 10-foot, 20-foot big alligators, right? So these alligators, the mother crocodile lays about 100 of them. Only one of them becomes ends up being being a 20-foot alligator. So you need to create that ecosystem, and you need to understand it statistical, and failure is part of it. And the last one is that tech companies are not Ponzi scheme guys, right? So for us, sometimes somebody, Madhu or somebody, you ask them, Madhu, a question, what should they go? You stay off our backs. That's enough sometimes, right? We have got the IT guys coming after us every year because they think we run a Ponzi scheme. So as though you don't have enough trouble otherwise, you have got the government coming after you.
Really? Oh God.
There are horror stories about how these people don't understand the whole financing of the semiconductor ecosystem, right? That's the problem.
What about a big government fund for VC fund for electronics or something?
That's already there, Sujit. They just have to implement it. The problem is execution, right? The roadway to hell is paved with good intentions. So intentions are not enough. There's a 10,000 crore for fund of funds. I'm not sure. I don't know of anybody who's got access to that and who's got anything into.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion, but I don't know. Others might have other opinions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vinay?
Money is there, has to be distributed.
So from my side, only one thing: for the product-based companies, we have to strengthen our manufacturing ecosystem, right?
Okay.
And when I'm telling the manufacturing ecosystem, I'm not just talking about the chip manufacturing. When we develop a product, there are so much of the different type of the material we use. Even a piece of plastic is very important for a product. Even a small button is very important. And even at the interdisciplinary biotech domain, the chemicals, which we import from the different countries. So we have to build a holistic ecosystem.
All of these. Okay. Srikanth?
What I would like to see is the government take the effects of air pollution seriously. We might have seen in the news the other day that 1.7 million people die every year in India alone just from air pollution, and it cost the economy 1.5% of the GDP. Imagine if we got that back. That's literally billions of dollars that are going down the drain. So if we just prioritize the right thing, whether it's supplies, building an ecosystem, improving public health by reducing pollution, I think we can make a whole world of difference.
Okay. Great. Thanks a lot. So create a market, ensure funding, and to all the students out there, get your hands dirty. There are plenty of resources online that you can use and try and apply them. Get internships in companies like Parag's and Madhu's and Srikanth's and Vinay's. There's a lot of opportunity in India. So thanks a lot to all of you from the Times of India and from Times Techies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.